Women Up Radio, designed to facilitate women's empowerment, improve your career, develop your talents, incorporate your passions, achieve fulfillment and success.
Hello, this is Women Up Radio, supporting Empower Women. And today we're talking about the role of women in literature and how books can support empowerment and women writers and careers. So lots to talk about. I'm joined in the studio by my guest, Lisa Goll, manager of the Bloomsbury Institute, organiser of some really great literary events, and also creator of the London Writers Café. So really, Lisa's an expert in all things to do with writing and publishing. So welcome to the programme, Lisa.
Oh, thank you very much. Delighted to be here.
Lovely. It was lovely to have you, especially to have creative arts. It's so interesting. So can I start by asking you more about the Bloomsbury Institute? What is it and what does it do? And also about your creation, the London Writers Café.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Bloomsbury Institute are the events that Bloomsbury Publishing host here in our offices in London, with our authors. And they're really sort of designed for readers so that they can come along and get to know their favorite, meet their favorite authors, hear a bit about where the books have come from, all the topics that the author has written about in more detail, and really have an experience, with other readers who like the same books. We also host some drinks before the talk, so there's an opportunity to sort of have a nice time and be here at Bloomsbury, where we all are all day, making the books that people like to read, we hope. So that's really what the Bloomsbury Institute is. And we sort of have those events a couple of times a month, so it really depends on the author's schedules and who's in town for literary festivals or on publicity tours. So we've had some really big names in the past, and really really good.
What sort of ranges of subjects are the books about? Is it everything, or is it predominantly?
Well, Bloomsbury publish in all areas, so we really want the Institute to reflect that. So I think there's a big influence of literary fiction, because that's one of our biggest areas. But we have lots of academic, we have lots of really high quality science and professional publishing. So we tend to pull the biggest ideas and the biggest books from those areas as well. And it really depends on the authors and who we think readers would want to meet. That's a big part of it as well. But we really go across the board.
It sounds very interesting, and it's great for people to actually be able to come along and hear the authors and their opinions and what's behind what they've done, etc. The London Writers Café?
So Writers Café is the other side of publishing, I think, in that it's for writers, fiction writers who are looking for sort of feedback and support, and we put on a lot of different sorts of events at Writers Café, where it's everything from a workshop on characters to a talk on how to submit to agents. And then the majority of what we do is peer review sessions where people share their work and for constructive feedback around the table. It's a really, really good sort of encouraging thing, I think, for writers to, if they've maybe shared it with friends and family, and they're starting to sort of think about getting some other feedback on their work, then bringing it to a group of writers who are always very constructive and very supportive, because we're all trying to do the same thing. That can really help someone sort of move their work forward.
I think it sounds good. And so, with all your experience in the creative field, so writing, publishing, event management, do you think there's a difference in the opportunities that are open to men and women in these fields, or are they similar?
Personally, I think they're very similar. And if anything, I think within publishing, there's a much higher percentage of women within the industry. And that's not to say that men don't have the opportunities as well. But I think it's a very open industry in that if you want to be in it and you love books and you want to work in books, then you can find a way.
Yes.
And you can bring your skills from other areas as well. I think that's a big thing that publishing more and more is looking for, is people who have done other things and they could bring that information and those skills to publishing. So in terms of, no, I think they are similar.
And what sort of skills would you say are good to bring into that?
Marketing, I think, definitely sort of digital technology sort of fields. And then there's always editorial skills are always in demand. So I think, but predominantly, I think publishers are always looking for, I think business development is a big thing as well. Yeah. So I think if you have worked in areas where it's really about sort of pushing companies forward in a way that's really innovative, then that's something that publishers really appreciate.
And what other sectors have you worked in? Because it's not just publishing, is it?
It isn't, but it's been a lot of publishing. But a sort of different sorts of publishing. So I sort of started in books, and then I went a little bit into retail for a while, and then went to newspapers. So I was in newspaper media sort of area. Yeah. So I think all within that sort of words and publishing area. And then events too is obviously a big part of it. And so I think, and that was across sectors and across industries.
Yes, yeah. And with those sectors, the ones that you've mentioned, are any better, do you think, or more open to career advancement for women? Is there a difference in any of them? Are there any easier?
Well, I think there's a lot. I think it's interesting because when I was thinking about talking about this today, I was sort of looking around, and I know there's lots of initiatives going on for women in publishing, and making sure that we're represented at the top of the industry, because there has always been a little bit of a skew towards men in the higher positions in the industry. But I think there's a lot of there's more awareness and more support, I think, of making sure that women are represented and are given the opportunities to be promoted and advance within publishing. And I would say that that's across publishing, that the sort of the campaigns that are going on for women in publishing, it's not just books, it is news media and the other areas, a lot of the creative industries.
Yeah. And do you need professional qualifications or training for these sectors, or can you find work, particularly in publishing and event management, where you don't really train first, where you can just learn on the job?
I think a lot of people have done some sort of qualification, some sort of degree for publishing, but we also at Bloomsbury, for example, we have paid internships, and that's something that very proudly to say that they are paid. And, it's something where someone can apply, to join an internship in lots of different areas across the business. That's not necessarily because they're sort of entry-level positions, or they're sort of positions where you are encouraged to learn on the job and you might experience a lot of different sectors of the industry. Those positions, are a good place to start, is what I would say. And so finding the companies that offer that sort of opportunity is where I would go if I wasn't, it's also a great way to sort of confirm for yourself that this is what you want to do.
Yes.
Before you go ahead and pay for a degree or go out and get a whole lot of qualifications, doing internships and placements and things. And, I got my first publishing job by writing a letter that was so long ago, to a publisher, just asking whether or not if they had any roles going. I had these sorts of interests. I said I would do just about anything, and he invited me down and had an interview and had moved to it a few weeks later. So I think if you really want to be in it, then you do find a way.
Yeah. And if somebody goes the degree route, what sort of degrees would be most suitable?
That's a very good question. I would say that if it's book publishing, then it's English degrees. Yeah. But if it's more sort of you're looking at that commercial, like business development or marketing, or then sort of much more your communications and what else? I mean, there's lots of MA programs in actual publishing now, which is something that didn't exist when I went to university. So it's completely designed for people who want to work in publishing.
Yeah. So with the industry, I know you talk like you've been in it for years, but you seem to be quite young, so I'm not sure that you have been in it that many years. But from the years that you've been there, do you think the industry's changed much? Not just for women, but also for the way that these different sectors work. I mean, particularly due to things like technology and globalization.
Yeah, I mean, I think even in the time that I've been in publishing, which is about a dozen years, it's radically different. I mean, it's not radically different, because I think it's such an incremental process that's happened over the years, but I think it's sort of reflective of how the whole world has changed over the last especially in the last 5 or 6 years. I think publishing has had to adapt, and it's had to move really much more quickly and be much more responsive than it may have had to have been in the 90s or something. But then I'm saying that as someone who wasn't working in it then, so someone else may have a different opinion of how it changed from those decades to now. But I think it's just, and I think it's just like anything. We talk about digital revolution non-stop, and it is completely, publishing has had to really move fast as a result of everything being available online. And wanting to make things available online. Yeah. And also, I think the idea of readers with publishers and people who are buying books has changed, because someone in, countries all over the world can now access the ebooks and the Audible books and all of the things all the formats that are available are much more available. So I think that's a great thing, because it's sort of made it more accessible for people to get to books, which is great.
And this is completely sort of off track, but for people that are publishing in different languages, is that now easier?
You mean that they're not non-English books?
Yeah. More because I mean, there's some authors I know who they're mostly in the business field that I'm thinking, but then you can think of the Harry Potter books as well. Where originally they would have just been in English or whatever.
Oh, I see.
They're from. And now,
translation.
You get them in.
I mean, I think, of course, that's definitely something that is growing all the time. We talk about books that are then translated into, say, 36 languages, so that they are available across the world. Harry Potter being an excellent example of that. But I think for authors, definitely they should perhaps be thinking about the fact that if they're writing a really kind of dark crime novel that's set in contemporary London, that could then have a lot of potential to be translated and read by German people. That's a big market for crime. Then obviously it might go off to Brazil. There's lots and lots of examples where business books or fiction or, if it's something that an agent or publisher believes could reach more readers if it was translated into a language, they will do that.
Yeah, good to know. Okay, so now, moving on to something that's a bit of a different tack, how has the role that women have played and continue to play in literature changed over the years? And I mean that both from the view of their character inside the cover of a book and in the world surrounding writing and publishing.
So I think it has changed. And again, it sort of comes back to that awareness that perhaps they weren't being represented. And I also mean that in terms of they weren't being represented, or they were being represented in maybe a two-dimensional way rather than a three-dimensional way in side stories as characters, but also within the industry. And I mean, that being said, all of us can think of fantastic female heroines or characters that you completely would want to be. And they are strong female characters who wouldn't, who have a lot of agency, and they continue to play a very big part in everyone's sort of cultural references. And then I think, that, as I was saying earlier, the idea of, there are a lot more opportunities for women, and if someone feels like there aren't opportunities for them, or they're being overlooked for some reason, then I think there's a lot of support organisations that you can get in touch with, a lot of groups that you can get in touch with that that would be happy to sort of hear what's happening and how they might be able to advise and to help those opportunities materialise.
Yeah. And also there seems to be a great surge in interest for self-development and business books. And many of these seem to focus on the role of women and equality, women's careers, how to progress. So are you seeing more interest developing in this field, both from readers and authors? I mean, more in this field than in other sectors? Or is it still the same? I mean, is it, the same balance that it's been over several years?
I think most publishers would probably say that they would really they want to be publishing the things that are being written about, but also what people are looking to read. So I think if, there are more titles generally in the world, more books being published every year overall. And I think, again, sort of, if there's someone out there and they want to write a business book and it's all about how to help women, achieve things in their career, that's probably because they've noticed that there aren't other books about that. And so they've written that book, and then lots of people think, oh, well, actually, that's a book I've been looking for. Yes. And I think in terms of sort of filling the gaps in the things that aren't being written about, and that can sometimes mean that there are a lot more books published in that section because it becomes more interesting to readers and authors.
And do you think maybe it's going too far? I mean, is the sector of self-development and business now becoming saturated? Because sometimes it seems that everyone's writing books about it and that it's becoming the fashionable marketing thing to do.
I think if, for people who are writing those books now, they really have to think about what is their fresh take on it? What is the new angle? What is it that they have to say, which could be completely important and everyone should definitely hear that. But what is that they've got, and is it something that's fresh enough and doesn't already exist? Because I think that's where publishing is perhaps going to pull back on the publishing that they are selecting in that area, because if it's not new and it's not bringing anything extraordinary to the sector, and the bookshelves, if someone's in Waterstones looking at that section, if that book isn't going to stand out, then it could mean that it doesn't actually make it. But I also think that if readers keep buying them and keep reading them, then yes, the publishing will continue, because that's really what it's driven by. So if the top 5 bestsellers are books about women and equality and career, then how to progress, then that will continue. The publishing will reflect that, because it's all about that, really.
Yeah. Okay. And this question is very much a women's empowerment question. So, what way do you think books and authors can help to empower women?
Well, feel really passionate about literacy, and I think so much can be helped and changed for women in the world with better literacy. And I think that does come down to books being made available, and authors doing what they can to make sure that their books are reaching all stratas of society, and just I think education knowledge is power, isn't it? And the more information, the more education and better literacy skills that are being invested in as a society, the better. So I think books and authors have a role to play there.
Yeah, I agree. I think books can do so much for so many people. Okay.
Because you are the books you read.
Yeah, exactly. I better change what I read. I'll change very quickly, and I'll hide my bookcase.
Well, we are also all a bundle of contrast too, I think. So we all have things on our shelves that we're very happy to talk about, and other things are like, oh yes, everyone has books that they choose that are just for themselves.
Yeah, I love sort of not trashy novels, light novels, that you can read in a couple of hours.
Of course.
They're thrillers or something like that, which is not exactly
I think so.
Not the height of classical literature, but
I think that's a big thing, because if if you're reading and you're enjoying it, then I don't think it matters whether it's literature or not. I think if you love reading and you're reading something you enjoy, then that's it. That's all you can ask for.
I have to say, I love reading Shakespeare's plays as well. So I do have a very strange character.
But I think the more widely, we had Anne Patchett here yesterday talking to us, which was wonderful. And she was saying quite rightly that the more widely, the more openly you read, the more you find out about the world we live in, which I think is just a wonderful way to think about it. So from those sort of, I quite like the sort of trashy detective novels, and then but then you might go and read some Thomas Hardy or something as well. So but the more widely you are read, the more informed you are, and perhaps you might be better to navigate this world we live in.
Yeah, well, I have to say my favourite author, and I wait every September counting the days, is Dick Francis.
Yes.
Very sad that he's now died, but lovely that his son continues to do the writing. So
yes, exactly. But long may it continue.
Exactly.
You are listening to Anna Letitia Cook at Women Up Radio.
So moving on to authors, I know becoming an author is a dream for a lot of us. Would you say in that some genres are more open to women than others?
When you say more open, what do you mean? Do you mean that more open to be published or more open to be written?
Both, really, actually. I mean, I was thinking more on where they would naturally seem to write because they get more possibility of publishing, but both.
Personally, I think people write the books that they want to write, and they need to write that authentically. Yes. So they can't. I don't think you could ever really write something based on, I'm sure this will get published, because I don't think there is that guarantee out there. And so I think just judging from the writers that I've met through Writers Café and everywhere, women write about everything, and I think there is perhaps a bit of a. It's almost the other way, that there's a lot of talk about women write the women's fiction books.
Yes. And
men can't write those sort of books, but actually there's a lot of men proving that to be false.
Yeah.
So and then women can't write really. I think anything that is a judgment about what you can and can't write in a genre, as a genre, for a woman, just ignore it. It does not matter, because just don't, because I think if you write a good book, it finds a way. I wouldn't let anyone say that you can't write that because you're a woman. That's if no one wants to hear that.
If the feeling is in you, do it.
Yes, I think so.
Okay. And for a woman wanting to pursue a career as a writer, what would you advise that helps them towards being successful? I mean, I'm sure it applies to men, but what do you advise as, the best way to try and become successful?
Read everything that you can in the area that you're writing in, I think, or at least read very widely, as we were talking about earlier, because I think the best writers are also the best readers.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that compares for preparing someone to become a writer or wanting to become a writer than reading books and knowing what sort of how a book comes together, how stories are told, what voice might, what voices might come through in the story, and even if you're writing business or non-fiction memoir, for example, then reading in that area as well. I would also say that just writing, every famous writing quote is about that. It's like making time to write. So every day you might write a few hundred words, but you have written that day, and I think that's what makes a writer.
Yeah.
And everyone that I've seen in the writing group at Writers Café who have gone on to publish their books or have gone on to be represented by agents, it's because they took the time and they did the work and they wrote the book. So I think there is that side of it.
It's a bit like becoming an athlete. You've got to exercise the muscle and practice.
Yeah, and also like you just got to get the words on the page, because I think a lot of people have fantastic ideas, and they can play with those ideas endlessly in their own heads, or talk about them a lot. Also, but actually it's often not until you're writing it that it really reveals itself to you. And I think that it's almost, if you want to be a writer, then writing it is the way to do it, because I think you can pay for a lot of courses, you can go to a lot of events all across London all about being a writer and becoming a writer, but if you're not actually writing your work, then I don't think, I think that's the real way to do it, because you can gather a lot of information and a lot of talks, but it's not actually the book itself that you want to write.
Yeah, it's not actually putting the words on the paper. For any of us that want to become a professional writer, or we want to change our and really focus on it, what things do you consider before taking the plunge?
Well, I think the best thing about writing, if you're doing other things, is that it's something you can do in very low risk, because you can sit down at your own kitchen table and start writing without any, I would say probably without any preparation. Because if you've got an idea, you've got the paper and you've got the tools, you can just start and see and spend some time maybe writing the first couple of chapters and see how it feels, see what it's like, and I think that's what a lot of people do. They carry on with their day-to-day lives as they have been doing, and then they do writing as a hobby for a bit until it sort of starts to take over. And I think writing is fundamentally a solitary pursuit. You don't need to do anything with other people before you start. You can just start, because that's what it is. It's you and the page alone.
Sounds great. By candlelight with a glass of red wine.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, one of my friends is a big fan of that. Big fan of drink beside him.
That sounds good. And so, how does the publishing industry support new writers? And for new writers, what are the best ways to approach publishing houses?
Well, publishing would stop if there were never any new writers, because we would never be able to publish new books or debut books. So I think that there's a huge amount of support in publishing for new writers. Again, there's a lot of really fantastic initiatives and competitions and story nights aimed at new writers. So if there's someone that they're just got started and they want to do some things with that writing, they can do that. It's just a matter of finding out which opportunities they want to take up. And then the best way to approach publishing houses, there's two different things here. So most of the big publishing houses don't accept unsolicited manuscripts. So the first thing to do is to look for an agent. You need an agent to represent you to approach a publisher. For the big publishers. So the first thing to do is to find an agent, and there's a lot of writing groups and writing I would probably try and find some more information about how to approach agents in the most professional way possible, so that you have the best chance of being accepted by them. For fiction, it's about finishing your book, because you have to have a finished book to approach an agent. So if you finish your book, approach an agent, and then they'll submit it on your behalf to the publishers. There are some publishers out there who accept direct submissions. So again, you finish your book and you present it to those publishers directly. And then there's also lots of other options out there for writers now if they want to self-publish or work with a publisher in a 50-50 arrangement. And then for non-fiction, so business books and memoir and science and all those areas that aren't novels, they're about a proposal. So and most agency websites will tell you what they want when it comes to that proposal and what that needs to contain. It's normally an introduction, some information about the author themselves and a bit of a sample of the writing so that it will go from there. That's how it works.
Yes, there's certain steps to follow, so people really need to find out properly the steps and follow them as they should be done. Otherwise, they miss the boat.
If agents have come into the Writers' Café to give talks, because I think it's really important for people to be able to hear the right information from the agent themselves. And so when they do that, they might talk about the fact that they get 200 submissions a week.
Oh, really?
So for some of the big London agents, absolutely. So you really want to make sure that pitch and that proposal that you send them is top notch, because it's very quick. It's very easy for them to think, actually, I'll just move on to the next one when they've got that much coming at them.
Yeah. So you need really good marketing skills to market yourself as a writer, just to get to the agent.
I think the one good thing about the agent submission is that it's all the same for everybody. That the material that they ask for is the same. So they're judging it purely on the quality of the work. Yeah. So you don't need to be a marketing professional to get an agent. That's not what they're looking for. They're looking for really, really good quality books that they can sell on to publishers on your behalf or with you. So for the writers out there who aren't very good at or don't feel comfortable doing all the self-promotion and marketing that may come later on, that's not something that they need to do at the beginning.
And normally, once somebody's got an agent, would they expect 3 months, 6 months, a year? But how long would it take to try and get to a publisher?
Yeah, that is a bit of an impossible question to answer, because it completely depends on when the book is taken by the agent. What time of year is it? Yes. Because there's a lot of different things that go on through the year, meaning that books will be sold faster or slower. Yes. And if it's around one of the book fairs, then it might be that a deal is done quite quickly. Yeah. But on the other side, it could take a number of months. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's only a few months, but it completely depends on schedules, and there's a lot of variables. And I mean, that's something that once the agent is involved, they're the best person to say, I think we can sell this by X. Yeah. Or I think, I'd really like us to have a deal by, this time. Yeah. And that, if they're the right agent for you, then they'll be, really working very hard to make sure that happens as quickly as possible.
Yeah. Okay. Coming back to the Bloomsbury Institute, because I know we talked about it briefly at the beginning, and the 3 events that you organise. Can you give us more detail? I mean, what type of authors? How does the event happen? Particularly anything related to women authors, obviously.
Yeah. Well, I'll use one of our recent examples. So Jenny Landreth is a writer, and she has written this wonderful memoir about her becoming a keen swimmer, of all things. Yes. And it's a really, really wonderful book about her swimming experience, but also about how women fought very hard to have the right to swim where they wanted to swim. Because just like the vote, at one stage they were sort of denied from swimming in public places. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of, in this book, Jenny's book Swell, she calls it her water biography, which I just love. It really goes in quite a lot of detail, but also really, really funny. Jenny's just so funny about the women and the rights that they had to fight for to swim, and what they did with it, when they got there, and all the wonderful outfits they had. And so the book is there, and we published the book at the beginning of May, and Jenny came in, I think it was that night, actually. I think it was the day the book came out, which is such a great thing for us at the Bloomsbury Institute. So we had Jenny come in, and she was interviewed or in conversation with Vivian Rickman-Poole, who is an outdoor swimming expert, and does a lot of features and travels around sort of documenting places to swim around the world, really extreme places to swim. Yeah. Really, really fascinating. So the two of them together were in conversation here at the Bloomsbury Institute. We had full house of swimming and fans and people from all over London who were really wanting to be there and find out more about this book. And
it sounds fascinating. I mean, particularly the combination of the two ladies and what they were talking about, and the really different aspect.
Yeah, and I think that's the part of what I really enjoy about Bloomsbury Institute, because I think perhaps more than some events that go on in bookstores, which are fantastic, and I've been to lots of them that I've really, really enjoyed. At Bloomsbury Institute, I think we're sort of trying to get a bit more to the heart of what the author really thinks about their book, and what brought them to write that particular book, more than the book itself, which is always a more interesting story, I think, about who they are as a person, and what drives them and what motivates them to write, and how that book was a result of all of that. And then having really interesting people come and talk to them as well. So Vivian Rickman-Poole was sort of someone that I thought, actually, rather let's find someone else who loves swimming as much as Jenny does, so that they can have, and also Vivian's involved in a photography project about women, and sort of making more of how they're represented there. So they had a lot in common, which I think is really makes for a really rich discussion. So we sort of had that most recently, and then in January there was another really fantastic. Peter Frankopan has written a book called The Silk Roads, which is all about the trade, the history of the trade routes and the Silk Roads, and how who had the power really in those bygone days, and he and Gideon Rackman from the Financial Times were talking about how they were talking about the Silk Roads, but they were also talking about where we are now, and how the world has changed so much, and all the political power and the